together for this last day of our convening. It is so good to be with you today. I'm Michael Baston, president of Cuyahoga Community College, and we have an extraordinary panel today, really thinking about the future of college completion from movement makers. Let's give a hand to our movement makers. So first, let me introduce Sarita Brown, the co-founder and president of Excelencia in Education, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to accelerating Latino success in higher education by linking research, policy, and practice to serve Latino students. Come on, let's give her a hand. Next, we have Janet Godwin, CEO of ACT, where she's worked in multiple roles for nearly 35 years. Come on, let's give her a hand.
Yay. I know her.
And finally, I'm pleased to introduce the Chancellor, Dannell Malloy, Chancellor of the University of Maine System and a former prosecutor, lawyer, mayor, and two-term governor of Connecticut. Let's give him a hand. So this is exciting because we really have movement makers with us today. And so I want to start just asking this question. I'll start with you, Sarita. In your current role, what is the most uncomfortable data point that crosses your desk? The number that keeps you up at night?
It's the disparity in the graduation of Latino students and all underserved students. We're, as a country, leaving talent outside our systems, and now, more than ever, the capacity for colleges, universities, educational systems to recognize the opportunities that CCA is all about and that all of us advance to close that proportion of students in America that have college degrees.
Thank you, thank you. Janet, same question. Sort of what number keeps you up at night?
There's so many, actually, but the one I'm going to talk about this morning is the 5.4 million underemployed people in the United States today. And for me, the conditions that lead to that is what it keeps me up at night. I want to make sure that students starting as early as junior high are starting to think about their college and career goals so they can chart a path for themselves, get access to the resources they need to build the skills they need to be successful in their post-secondary pathway, whether it's a four-year college degree, a community college degree, certifications, apprenticeship programs, internships, any kind of post-secondary credential that will enable a learner to move effectively into a meaningful job. And the fact that we have 5.4 million people today that are underemployed says to me we are not doing enough to help those learners be successful.
Thank you. Dannell, same question. What is the number that keeps you up at night?
What's sleep? The number that keeps me up at night is the number of folks we bring in as freshmen who leave in the first or after the second semester. The chances of those individuals ever receiving a baccalaureate degree declines mightily as a result of that. That's what keeps me up. I mean, you lose a substantial portion of your incoming class. All of us do. And are we doing enough to bring that number down? Now, having said that, I can also celebrate that our system right now has its highest retention rate on a year-to-year basis in 20 years. So as I've described to the trustees, that's part of an overnight success that only took 5 years to get to. So, but it's the moral imperative to do better rather than to sentence someone to no baccalaureate degree. And I think we need to think of that issue that way, and then we need to bring everybody along on that. I think our professors and teaching staff can play a role. I think fellow students can. I think having the right services available to students makes a difference. But if there's a number that I fret about the most and feel partially responsible for, it's that drop-off of freshmen.
Thank you so much. Now, the Lumina Foundation Stronger Nation tracks America's progress toward that 60% post-secondary attainment goal by 2025. And now we're in 2024, 1 year away from that date. The current data shows the country at 54.3% attainment. So what do we do now? What happens if we don't meet the goal in 1 year, and how do we move beyond 2025? So I want to start this time with you, Janet. One of the common threads of nearly any conversation around higher education right now is technology, especially generative AI. AI is shifting how we both prepare students for the workforce and what they'll need to be prepared. So what do you see as both the challenges and opportunities with AI for both your organization and students?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question and very timely, obviously. But real fast on this attainment question. I feel strongly we need to start earlier. Start in high school, if not earlier, in terms of students setting those goals. And so then thinking about this in the light and the context of these emerging technologies, generative AI, large language models, et cetera. One, I think we need to do a very good job educating students around how to use these tools. These tools can be amazingly helpful and help you be more productive and generate some summaries that you can then go do higher order work from, so you don't have to do as much legwork. So these tools can be incredibly powerful and helpful, and students need to understand how to ask the right questions of these tools, of these AI technologies. They need to be able to think critically about the outputs, because these algorithms really are just trained on data. And if the inputs to the algorithms are faulty or misinformation or not accurate or not contextualized for the question that's being asked of the AI, the results will not be relevant and may contain misinformation. So students need the abilities and the skills to think critically about when to use these tools, how to judge the quality of these tools, and not just believe anything an algorithm tells you. It could be wrong. And so I think these are very important things that we need to take into account in terms of education, preparation and readiness for college, and also preparation and readiness for the workforce.
So go back to the conversation on attainment. So we're that a year out. Talk to us a little bit about, so what's next? And how does that impact what you do?
So for me, my organization, ACT, we focus largely on starting students in middle school through their high school journey and helping them understand and define and create their path after high school. And we want to make sure that we're setting students up for success, meaning they've had the experiences and the access to resources to help them plan and navigate and discover. Not everyone knows how to do this. A lot of families who have not had experience in a post-secondary education environment, it's daunting. There's so much information, it's hard to parse through it, it's hard to make it relevant for a specific learner. And so at ACT, we're trying to bring tools to bear to help individual learners in a meaningful, relevant way find their path. Also then, we want to make sure that students can demonstrate readiness for success. So back to your concern, Governor, around freshman retention, one of the very best ways for a student to persist through their freshman year is to be ready for the academic rigor of those courses, and on the college campus have the supports they need to be successful. Everyone's coming to a college with a different set of backgrounds and experiences and needs different supports, and which is one of the things I love about CCA is your support pillar. It's incredibly important. So readiness for college is an incredibly important piece around attainment, but I would also say support is another piece that is incredibly important for students to actually attain that credential, that degree, so they can move on to their post-secondary experiences and be, a meaningful participant in our democracy.
And are you using AI as part of your strategy?
100%. We're using AI in the company and just helping us be more productive, but we're also looking at creating AI tools that can be freely accessible to learners, their families, to school counselors, to help demystify the resources that are out there around how to plan, college and what college is relevant for me, what career path, what major, et cetera. As long as the content that's being used to train the AI is credible, quality, confirmed, which is what we're doing, these AI tools can be a resource to support learners in addition to the other adults in their lives to help them think through that path to college.
Thank you so much, Dan. We'll get back to the AI question in a moment, but I do want to come to this idea of attainment. We're a year out from that 60% sort of bar, We're only at 54.3%. So what do we do?
You know, I'm not sure we should look at 54% as a failure. The reality is we are making progress in that regard. And I think that we have more partners in doing that today than we had when this effort started. So, okay, you know, we should always set high goals. And maybe we need to set a higher goal with a couple of more years on it. But I can see the progress being made in New England states. Obviously, that's where I am, and it's big. There's also another side to this, and that is, at least with the current administration, there's a lot of money flowing to address that issue, and whether that continues or not may ultimately be the deciding factor of whether we get to when and where, or do we get to 60%. But I think it's absolutely attainable, and I celebrate the success that's already been had, and I don't think we should look at it as a negative that we're a year away. We're not going to get to 60%. Some places will, by the way. Some states will. But you know, think about where we were 10 years ago in that regard. So, you know, in higher education, we're used to kicking ourselves. I'm not sure this is one we should kick ourselves over. And by the way, I think Lumina's spot on, and they're right, and they set the right goal, and it just takes a little bit longer to get there. And quite frankly, I think it took a little bit longer to get people on the side of doing that than people had anticipated. But once on board, I think we could ask people in the room what the change is in their state, and you would be surprised.
And very interesting. Sarita, you certainly are all in on attainment. Can you speak to this?
Well, I think in taking stock of the impact a year out, we also have to acknowledge the pandemic. And I think institutions learned, communities learned, students learned, families learned all kinds of things that missing the deadline, which we should hold ourselves accountable for, also needs to be seen in context. So Excelencia in education absolutely is all in when it comes to college completion. The genesis of the momentum that we now are propelling through this moment and into 2025 and the future is the realization that when everybody, Lumina, Gates, the Obama administration, started to say, how do we galvanize leadership in this country to look at efficacy in terms of institutions of higher education, and the measure became completion. As a parent, when my child goes to college, I want her to complete her degree, and I want it to be valuable, and she takes it into life. And that was commonsensical, and we did lots of things that engaged people, but then structural, which is where all of us have been involved. And the moment for today, which is, I'm not going to cede an inch without front-end discussion about attainment. It's still the measure. We have all kinds of things that are going on about the value of college degrees and all kinds of, as you can see from my gestures, talk about whether or not everybody needs a degree. Everybody needs to be able to fulfill their aspirations, and the capacity of colleges and universities to meet the technical needs, the content needs of students who seek admission. We're settling on that fundamental piece, which is the social contract between colleges and universities when they admit a student. If they admitted them, they thought the students had what it took. And then it is measured by, if the student does everything that is necessary, what does the institution do in response? So for our discussion about attainment, even though we recognize that the macro public national discussion, whether or not attainment is, last team's goals, no, it is this country's measure of the efficacy of colleges and universities, and attainment and the capacity for real institutions, educators, real communities, to give students the ability to attain the degrees, the education that they seek. That's still the road ahead, whether it takes 1 year or 5 years. And the capacity for all of us to stay strong on that functionally, which is what this conference is all about, but also in the town square, because the role of higher education in our society is the other element of what's on the table and under debate. And I come to it as bullish on the capacities of institutions of higher education to serve all America, as I was when we started this with ensuring America's future by increasing Latino college completion.
I love it because I hear oftentimes, well, college is not for everyone. And I push back and say, well, every program is not for everyone, but there's a college for everyone in this country.
And it's not up to us to decide.
That's
it is
right.
up to the students, the families, and the communities to decide.
Absolutely. Love it. So let's kind of think also about what's happening in contemporary context and go back to this idea of generative AI and what AI will mean as it relates to this overall strategy. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what's happening from your perspective?
From our perspective, because our unit of analysis for action is working directly with colleges and universities, and while deeply appreciate focusing on students and their knowledge of how to filter and use, I'd like to look at the professionals of the institutions, because AI has hit higher education like a sledgehammer in certain places. And that same sort of what does it do and where do you default and how do you use it effectively, that's very much the discussion of staff and faculty. And there are lots of opinions. I mean, we're still debating all kinds of things about the uses of technology before AI. And now you have the power of AI to mimic what naive, but whether it be professional students or faculty, what is it that I'm looking at? What is the source of this information? How do I know that it's credible? And so for us, looking at certain institutions, Arizona State, for instance, is one that embraced the use of AI to do a lot of the out-of-classroom activities. Now, whether or not, I don't know if the students have done a review to know that these are credible and those are not. The part that I confess, I'm a neophyte like a lot of people, which is how are people going to use the AI in their intellectual products? How are they going to use this? And as they do, is that going to make us, in terms of the educational enterprise, dependent on technologies in a way that if the power goes out, people can't get out of a building? I'm using this as an example, but the navigation of what is it that each of us believes is necessary in terms of skills and abilities, technology or not, AI or not, what's fundamental to our capacity to succeed? Those are in some ways value-driven discussions, less technology and tactical discussions. That's what we're looking to see which of the institutions in our network are engaged in, because the application of AI, that seems to be happening even if no one is making a decision. And it's happening organically, and professors and staff are trying to figure out how to react to that. So that domain and the realization that even as we move policy forward, we move system changes forward, the influx of this, that's where leadership and thoughtful coalition is going to be super important.
And to make sure it's a tool and not a crutch.
Absolutely.
You know, absolutely. Dan, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, I think it's important not to criminalize AI. And I think that was a lot, and I use that term, just to make a point. I think if you look at the last year in discussion of AI, it's quite different today than it was a year ago. And of course we should use new tools that are created. I think they did that with the wheel. And I think we should embrace it. And I think one of the interesting facts is that at the very outset, a lot of educators were nervous about this, thinking that this would somehow pollute education. and not give people the upbringing that they had. You had to read everything and you had to do everything. And by the way, when I went away to college, calculators had first become affordable at $125. And of course, the next rule was you can't bring it into a classroom. So staff is using AI, professors are using AI, and students are using AI, and that's appropriate. Now, should we have standards? Yes. Should there be disclosure and discussion? Obviously, there needs to be that. But this is a tool that's never going to go away, until it's replaced by something else. That's also how humanity works. So we're embracing it and encouraging it. And quite frankly, also continuing to do research about how to do those things well. But we didn't throw away the wheel, didn't throw away the shovel, didn't throw away paper. These are things that we need to adjust to. I think it's extremely exciting. I tell this one story, and I'll do real quick. We were doing a search, and there was a committee involved in that search. There were 40 applications for that search. We asked AI, or I didn't, but somebody much brighter than me did, asked AI to go through everyone's resume to say whether they had met the standards that were and then to rank the finalists. Never disclosing that information to the entire group. In the end, the top 4 candidates that AI had identified as having the best resumes ended up being the 4 finalists in the search. Now, if you have to read 5-page resumes and responses to an ad, and you have to do 40 of those, can you imagine how many hours that takes? And then if you multiply that, say, times the 5 people on the committee, so we're inventing efficiencies, and AI is a gigantic step forward.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I have another question for all of you. When you look at voting rates, civic engagement, and trust in democratic institutions, all show sharp divides by education level. As you shape these institutions that are supposed to strengthen democracy, are you finding that higher education is truly serving its democratic mission? I'm going to start with you, Janet.
I'm happy to answer that. And of course, I'm looking forward to my panelists' comments on this too, because this is a very important question. I 100% believe higher education institutions have a role in helping learners engage in our democracy. Number one, by helping them attain the credentials and the skills they need to participate meaningfully in the economy. That's important as part of our system, having that ability to participate and feed your family and continue to learn and progress in your career. And higher education gives people the tools to do that. I think the second thing that higher education does is it gives people the skills to be able to participate thoughtfully in our systems and instincts around our civic duties in support of our democracy and the communities and the regions in which we live and work and worship. That the skills around collaboration and critical thinking and understanding that there are multiple voices, there are multiple points of view, but we don't have to demonize each other because we disagree. We can find a way to have dialogue and create debate that's healthy, that's moving our nation forward and our communities forward and our families forward and our institutions forward, but we don't have to demonize to do that. And I think higher education has a role in helping to build those skills through healthy debate in the classroom, engaging with different points of view. I think there's nothing more important. If we're in our own little echo chamber of only talking to the people that believe the same way we believe or look the same way we look or have the same backgrounds that we have, we are not going to be able to participate meaningfully in this democracy. And what higher education does is it brings people together from diverse backgrounds in a setting that allows those skills to build, to be practiced. We don't emerge knowing how to have a healthy, respectful dialogue and debate with someone with a different point of view. We have to learn that and we have to practice it. And for me, higher education is a forum in which we are given the opportunity to build those skills so that we can take them into our society and uphold our democracy.
Dan?
Yeah, I think that this issue is important. I think there is an anti-intellectualism movement in the United States, and some of that movement is based on fear of losing contact with the child that you've had for 18 years, 365 days a year, and turning them over to somebody who might have them for up to 4 years and substantially fewer days of the year. People have said to me, well, if Johnny goes from rural Maine to the University of Maine, he may not come back. He may end up someplace else. I think there's lots of things that are feeding this anti-intellectualism, this desire to keep someone at home or closer to home or not to meet other people, is what has to be combated. And we can't do that by knocking people. We can't do that by saying they're wrong. We have to understand where they're coming from. What I also say is free speech comes with an obligation. It's to listen. And we should live that. We should be listening more and understanding what drives this angst in parents and communities and why it's greater in some places than others. The other thing, quite frankly, is I don't think we're, as a nation, telling the truth. A lot of alternative facts, a lot of things that I can have an opinion on that you can't knock or can't discuss or can't involve. So I think we have to be open to it. We have to understand that this is a problem. We have to be engaged in combating that problem, and we need to celebrate the success of those folks that we help succeed.
And Sarita, you get the last word on that.
I agree with what has been shared. At the same time, I think it's incumbent on all of us to hold ourselves accountable for where we point our attention. And I, like the rest of us, watched the congressional hearings, but that was a handful of institutions, and those were individual leaders. And felt for them, saw that, but we live in a country with 4,500 colleges and universities. And when many things are said about higher education, painting with a broad brush, our reaction at Excelencia is to say, that's fine, but you are talking about a set of 75, maybe 150 institutions. And in this country, there are colleges and universities that are absolutely rooted in communities, that know deeply who they serve, why they serve. And in that discussion, or with that lens, then talking about democracy, it's a completely different kind of conversation. Because the ethos, let's take a community like El Paso. And there, it's not without its issues. El Paso Independent School District is trying to deal with demography and closing schools. I mean, El Paso's not perfect, but El Paso is a community with a community college, with a university, and with clarity about the purpose, the public purpose of education. And in that definition of purpose is, how do we function as a community? How do we function as a society? Now, I'm not going to say that necessarily they have a civics curriculum and they're necessarily cranking all that out, which is where my head goes when you talk about democracy. As a country, I think the evidence is pretty clear that we have not tended the transition of knowledge from generation to generation about how this country works, how systems work. I mean, whatever our take on the election outcomes, participation was high, that's a good thing, but do people understand what is this transition? I don't know that in my view, I don't know that we did or do, and I think we're all going to get lessons of pretty extreme, and I'm not being political about the outcome of the election, but we're going to learn. Because the question going to be, is higher education good for democracy? I think it's one of the few enterprises in our country that is. because it continues to be the domain, everything that Janet was saying, it continues to be the domain where even if you come in for an engineering degree or you come in for something else, you're going to rub elbows with people who are different. And that part is, I think, essential for democracy.
I'm out of time, but come on, let's give a hand to this phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal panel. These wonderful movement makers are making a difference. And they've challenged us today to make a difference as well. As you go back into your communities all around this country, we've got to be all in because completion matters, and so do you. I want to thank one more time this great panel. Come on, put your hands together. Dannell, Malloy, Janet Godwin, Sarita Brown.